really exciting findings about the impact that Asheville Habitat's work has had on the community. You may have noticed already, but if you glance down at your placemat, it's going to serve a dual purpose for us today. And I hope you'll follow along as we sort of talk through some of these numbers and what they might mean. The data that you're looking at, I'll send a shout out to Maddie as well for the beautiful visual display of this information. The data that you're looking at comes from a survey we did of all current Habitat homeowners, Asheville Habitat homeowners, as part of a broader impact assessment that we're doing to learn about the value of the work that this affiliate has done over the past 40 years, and its impact from the sort of household and individual level all the way up to sort of the broader community impact that this work has had. And so I'm working on a set of projects that's looking at that to kind of document and quantify that. And the survey is a really big part of that. We wanted to hear from Habitat homeowners about their experiences with homeownership and what it's meant to them over the years that they've lived in their homes. So I want to give a little bit of a background on how we did the survey and who responded before I get into the data. As I said, it's really about hearing directly from homeowners. We wanted to collect as many voices as we could to hear from as many people. So we did a lot of different things to try to lower the barriers to participation and really incentivize folks responding and responding honestly about their experiences. We made the survey available in 4 different languages other than English. We made the survey available online and in paper format. We contacted people in a variety of different ways to try to really reach as many people as possible. We instituted protocols to protect the anonymity of respondents so that they could feel comfortable responding honestly about their experiences. And we offered a gift card as a thank you for their time. And that was important because it was a more than 60 question survey, so it was quite a long survey, and a lot of time and energy that folks put into giving us their answers. Those are all sort of best practices for surveys. Ultimately, it came down to whether people would, homeowners themselves, about whether they would participate in this, whether they would share their stories with us once again, sometimes many, many years later. And that's why we're so grateful and happy to have received the responses that we did. Since 1983 up through the end of 2022, Asheville Habitat has sold 368 homes. Some of those are buybacks, those are not all new construction, but 368 homes. Of those, there were 264 folks eligible to participate. We really wanted to zero in on original homeowners who are still in their homes. So we didn't ask folks who moved away or folks who are the heirs of the original homeowners or anything like that. We went to look at the folks who moved in and asked them about what was going on in their lives before and after homeownership. We received 120 completed responses for a 45% response rate, which we're very happy with. And we heard from a really highly representative sample. So we heard from folks across the long span of time that this work has been happening. We heard from folks from a diverse racial ethnic backgrounds. We heard from folks from a variety of income levels. We heard from a really good representative sample, which is why we can feel so confident in the kinds of findings that we got out of this survey. So the design really came out of long-standing research that links stable housing, and particularly homeownership, with positive outcomes in other parts of people's lives. And the research points to 5 key areas that you can sort of see outlined in this handout. So that's where we sort of organize the survey around, these 5 key areas. What's the impact on folks in these areas? And again, these are areas that are coming out of the research, but I think people feel that way too, intuitively. People see those linkages as well. When we hear from folks in their applications, they tell us about their hopes and dreams, not just for home ownership, but of all the other ways that their lives might be changed as a result of it. They tell us about, wanting to provide their children with stability and educational opportunities, about getting involved in the community, about having a stronger financial foundation. They talk about these things when they talk about homeownership. And I think the big high-level takeaway from this survey is that, to me is the most important, and I hope that you'll find that too, is that those dreams are really being realized for so many families who own Habitat homes. So it is 4 walls and a roof, and it is a stable home, but it's also a lot more for folks. And I encourage you, as I go through these sort of areas of life, these categories, I'm going to talk about them discreetly, each one in order. But I encourage you to think about how they intersect in people's lives in that way. Right? These are not siloed things. These are threads that all weave together to create a thriving life. So keep that in mind as I kind of zero in on each topic here. So let's get into it. And I'm not going to necessarily read every statistic, but I am going to want to pause at each sort of category and give a little bit of context and talk a little bit more about what the significance of these findings are, and sometimes add a little bit of extra information for you. So let's start with education. And research has long associated stable housing and homeownership with positive educational outcomes, high academic achievement. And we don't, it's a really complicated question of how that works together, what happens there. But we can report that, according to our homeowners, many families described positive and in many cases improved outcomes in their educational experiences for themselves and for their children. 100 respondents told us about their children's educational experiences. Not everybody had children living in the home, of course. And we see a strong minority improved their grades, and we see similar numbers when we asked about attendance in school and behavior in school, all those markers of educational achievement. And many others continue to do very well. Their children had already been thriving in school, and that trajectory continued. And when we think about the sort of broader positive outlook, we can see it kind of being realized when we look at the graduation rates that folks are reporting as well. Of 126 children who became old enough to graduate high school while they lived in their home, 95% of them did. That is slightly higher than the current Asheville City and Buncombe County rates, but higher when we think of the longer term. It's much higher than historic rates. And it is really significantly higher than the graduation rates for economically disadvantaged students in these school systems. So it looks like children of folks living in Habitat homes are achieving very highly, right, in their secondary education. And we heard from a lot of families. They had an opportunity to sort of write text, and we heard from a lot of folks about how affordable homeownership opened opportunities for educational growth and achievement. And that extended into for folks who are adults. Lots of people talked about going back to school, getting further training, getting further degrees. And 35% of those we asked linked that experience to Habitat homeownership, said that Habitat homeownership allowed them or another adult in their lives or in their homes to go back and to get further education. And I refer you to this sort of testimony that we've included here. This is a person who's able to cut back on their hours at work so that they could obtain a higher degree and presumably a higher earning potential as well. All right, let's move to the health category, or the health sort of area. Blessedly, many of the families that worked with Habitat reported that their health was very good to begin with. So that's really really a lovely sort of fact. But still, when asked about the overall health of those in their homes, consistently over 40% of folks reported improvements in their own health, their children's health, or another adult's health. So we are seeing kind of big picture health improvements. But where we really see markedly significant improvements is in the constellation of factors that reduce health risks and promote healthy development. For one thing, for instance, you can see here we see a steep decline in reports of exposure to common health hazards, mold, mildew, pests, that sort of thing. And I think this finding is probably linked to the improvement that more than half of families reported related to respiratory conditions like asthma, more than half of the families in general. And that is an improvement that is particularly significant among those who had episodes more frequently, right? So more serious conditions are experiencing pretty significant improvements. We all know that, right, a lot of those chronic conditions like asthma can be exacerbated by environmental challenges, and so this is a real a way to alleviate that struggle for a lot of folks. And we saw that the ability to pursue healthy activities and preventative care also increased significantly. You can see here 57% said that they were better able to afford medications and glasses and that sort of thing, right? That they were able to divert those precious resources that they might have been spending on excessively expensive housing to things that they desperately need for themselves and their families. We see sort of similar responses when we asked about folks' ability to age in place, about their ability to exercise and play outside, to be exposed to the outdoors in a healthy and safe way, about their ability to visit doctors and get regular checkups for their family, right? So these are all sort of big picture, longer term influences on health outcomes that people are reporting significant improvements in their lives on. All right, the next one I want to talk about is financial, and these outcomes are pretty unambiguously positive. The vast majority of homeowners said that being a Habitat homeowner improved their financial well-being. You can see that in that statistic there. 84% said that being a Habitat homeowner positively impacted their finances, and that includes more than 50% who said that it extremely positively impacted their finances. So lots of folks feeling a great deal of improvement in that area. So what does that look like sort of in more specific terms? Well, we used a nationally recognized measure called, from the Financial Health Network, called the Financial Health Score, to try to put a number on that. And what that demonstrated was a tremendous growth in overall financial health for folks. We asked a series of 8 questions that were designed to create a composite financial health score from 0 to 100. And it was useful to use these questions for a lot of reasons: a comparison from before and after, as well as allow us to make a comparison to national benchmarks or national averages. And folks, when they answered the question about what their financial health was like before, they averaged a score of a 47, and after homeownership in more recent times, they averaged a score of 69, which is a growth of 46%. That is a significant change for folks financially. And that after number is especially exciting because it does exceed the national average. So Asheville Habitat homeowners are doing better financially than the average American. Right? So the Financial Health Network does rate 80 as financially healthy, so there's plenty of room for growth, and not just for Habitat homeowners, but for the country as a whole, it seems like. But it is still a really significant improvement, and more than 30% of homeowners who answer these questions do fall in that category of financially healthy. So that's really good. We also asked an additional question about how well folks felt that they could handle a major unexpected expense. After homeownership, 47% of people said that they could handle it completely or very well. And that's compared to 16% before. So 3 times the number of people felt able to tackle a major financial challenge in their life and not have it set them back really far. The next thing we'll talk about is environmental impact, mostly as seen through energy efficiency. And this one we did do a little bit differently. This is not from the survey, this is from internal data. As many of you know, Asheville Habitat is the largest Greenbelt certified builder in North Carolina. We've been in this program for a lot of time. And so we worked with Greenbelt Alliance to find an average energy efficiency score for the homes built in the last 10 years. 10 years just because that's as far back as their good data goes. And we found that the average Habitat home is 33% more efficient than a comparably sized new home whenever they were built. So 33% more efficient. And some are more and some are less, but that's the average that we're looking at. Now, energy bills are different. Their family sizes, home sizes, lots of things kind of go into that. But the latest data I've seen is that the average energy bill in Buncombe County is about $182. That would, 33% more efficient would equate to more than $700 a year in cost savings. And that figure is probably more stark when we consider that a lot of folks are moving from older housing stock that doesn't have as many even as new homes, energy efficient conditions as new homes would. These figures sort of talk about how Habitat homeownership is lowering the energy burden for lower income folks, for whom being energy cost burden is actually quite common, right? So it's lowering the energy burden, and it's also lowering their energy footprint. So it's good for the pocketbook and good for the environment. So finally, let's turn to community and social engagement, and this one's a little bit more difficult, I think, to quantify because it can take formal and informal terms, and what does it mean to be socially and community engaged in your social and society and community, right? Nevertheless, it is really, social and community engagement is essential to our social fabric and vital to our democratic system. So it is important for us to try to understand. And we asked a variety of different questions to kind of get at that, to figure out how connected folks felt to their community and how engaged they were civically, socially, and politically. And across various measures, we saw a lot of increased engagement from folks. The first figure that you see there is 37%. So they increase their engagement in social and community activities, and that's sort of like volunteering and participating in community activities. So getting out in the world and contributing to sort of community activities. And we saw also that folks indicated an increasing engagement with the political system across all measures, and that was more folks said that they were registered to vote, more folks said that they voted regularly in federal elections as well as local elections. And we highlight local here in part because that showed the most significant growth, people getting involved in local political issues that were important to them. But also because in some ways it is a really good proxy for community embeddedness and connectedness, right? And then the last figure that we have here is that 67% feel connected to their community. And that is a figure that is twice the number that felt before moving into their Habitat home. And that is a big sort of kind of unknowable ask. Do you feel connected to your community? But it does sort of speak to the social capital that people might feel. That they feel that they can speak to their neighbors. They feel listened to. They feel supported. And so we're really happy to hear that sort of thing. And I think the testimony that we have here in this section speaks really beautifully to how homeownership affordable homeownership in particular, can encourage community engagement. This is an individual who is obviously engaged with their micro-community, their neighborhood, but also out in the broader city and the broader community. And this person speaks to the fact that it wasn't about a new interest in engaging, it was a new ability for them. To not have to work so many hours to make ends meet, and to have the time to do the things that they'd always wanted to do, which is make their community better. So I encourage you to look a little bit at this a little more tonight, and feel free to ask me any questions. But before we close, I do want to note a couple of things. I do think it's important to note that not everybody reported positive outcomes. And some folks reported positive outcomes in some areas and not in others. And we understand that life can be very complicated and challenging for folks. Still, it is really thrilling and I think pretty humbling to acknowledge the long-term and far-reaching effects the work of this program does for folks. the opportunities it creates. And I think these numbers tell the story of homeownership as a fulcrum for people. And they tell the stories of families who fought long and hard to achieve homeownership and then worked day in and day out to turn that opportunity to more opportunities, more achievements, and more joys in their life. And so when we say, like, homeownership might mean this or might mean that, or when folks tell us what they think homeownership might mean to them, those aren't just empty platitudes. We see evidence now that those things are happening and they have happened for folks. And I think, the last thing I'll leave you with is that these numbers also tell a story of how the work done by every member of this community, families who are in the program, families who are purchasing their home, volunteers, donors, staff, those efforts pay really compounding dividends. Those efforts mean a great deal in that big, momentous occasion of a key passing, of the first day of move-in, of closing, but they mean a lot more. They continue to mean a great deal for folks in the days and weeks and years afterwards. And so that's what I think we can think about is 40 years is a lot of output if we talk about homes and repair jobs done and all those things which are so important to quantify, but it also can mean a lot of other things for folks as they take that opportunity and run with it. Opens a lot of doors for people. So, thanks for your time, and thanks for being a part of this.